Hello and welcome into this Wednesday edition of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. I do truly appreciate it. I know I say it every time, but it sincerely means a lot to me that you guys take a little bit of time out of your day to join me and talk about some Packers. So let's get right on to it. My main topic today is going to be going over my offensive grades from this past Sunday's game against the Chicago Bears. But before I get there, just a couple quick notes that I want to go over. First of all, it looks like the Houston Texans have hired their general manager. And this isn't a major breaking news, certainly for a Pack a Day podcast, but it just made me think of that January in 2018, almost 3 years ago to the day, where Brian Gutekunst was on a plane on his way, and I think he actually made it to Houston. I could be wrong on that, but on his way to Houston, made it to Houston, I believe, and he was going to interview for the Houston Texans general manager job. It seems like if he wasn't one of if he wasn't the candidate, he was certainly one of the finalists for that GM position. And as he's going down, Mark Murphy makes him the offer for the GM job. If you remember up to that point, Elliott Wolf, Russ Ball, Brian Gutekunst, there were all different ideas, and it had seemed at the time like Russ Ball was the front runner for the position, but in the end, it ends up being Brian Gutekunst. And by the way, for the Houston Texans, they hired a GM, since moved on. Then Bill O'Brien gets the GM job, since moved on. And then now they have their third GM since 2018, just 3 years ago. And in the meantime, Brian Gutekunst obviously becomes general manager of the Green Bay Packers, has made a ton of amazing moves, as we kind of discussed yesterday. And the rest is kind of history. And we'll see, back-to-back 13-3 seasons. We'll see what ends up coming of this season. But just kind of this crazy juxtaposition between the Texans franchise, who have had a couple nice seasons mixed in there. And certainly Deshaun Watson's a big part of their future. But they are behind the eight ball right now. And in the meantime, the Packers have built something pretty special here in Green Bay with Brian Gutekunst. I think both Brian Gutekunst and the Green Bay Packers have to be fairly happy with how that's turned out. The other big piece of news, two former Packers were, elected finalists for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Leroy Butler as well as Charles Woodson. And forgive me, I still say Leroy. I think it's Leroy. I get those two mixed up all the time. So I know I'm going to get murdered for it because I should know it. And certainly I should know it because he's one of my favorite players that I've ever had the privilege of watching, and certainly should be a Hall of Famer. But Butler, is more than deserving at this point. He's a finalist for the second straight season. I can't think of a better way for Leroy Butler as well as Charles Woodson to go into the Hall of Fame in the same class. I have a hunch that Charles Woodson's going to go in technically as a Raider, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Charles Woodson will be a Hall of Fame Packer to me and Packer fans everywhere. And Charles Woodson, to me, exemplifies, what this game is all about. So does Butler. And, both of those players just changed the way that their position was played. For Butler, the safety that can come in, blitz off the edge, play more in the box, still intercept a ton of passes, have a ton of sacks. I mean, what Fritz Shurmur was able to do with him was unbelievable, and such a huge part of that Packers Super Bowl run in '96. And then Charles Woodson, that slot corner position. I mean, man, he was part safety, part corner, part linebacker, part edge rusher. He did everything, and again, completely changed the way that Dom Capers, played that defense on their 2010 run to the Super Bowl. Just two of the all-time greats. I hope they both get in. I mean, Charles Woodson's a foregone conclusion. He's going to get in. The only semi-question is whether he's the first ballot, which I'd be shocked if he isn't. And then, of course, will Butler get in? I think he does get in at some point. I think it's going to be tough this year with the Peyton Mannings and the Charles Woodsons. We'll see what happens with Kelvin Johnson. That's an interesting one as well. But here's hoping that both Butler and Woodson get in the same year, because that would be a ton of fun, and certainly both are more than deserving of the accolade. All right, let's go over my offensive grades for the week. Let's start with my top three Packers. Number one, Aaron Rodgers. Now, this was a little bit of an interesting one. He threw what I deemed three interceptable passes in this game. The little kind of screen pass to the side where Barkevious Mingo almost picks it off. You've got the one where he, kind of scrambles out of the pocket, doesn't see Kindle Vildor, breaking back and almost throws an interception there. And then on the run again, throws a the ball to Alan Lazard. Just it seemed like it was just behind Lazard, and then Eddie Jackson had a chance to intercept that one. So 3 interceptable passes, which usually isn't going to amount to a huge grade, but I thought all 3 were just enough of not interceptable where, yeah, they could have been picked, but they would have been tough interceptions. The Vildor one may be the exception to that, but so they didn't grade massively in the negative. They still were, they still were bad, trust me. But overall, I thought his game outside of those 3 plays was really good. He had the deep ball, the MVS that he completed. He had the deep ball, and really, if you watch, Dan Orlovsky's breakdown of that play, or Matt LaFleur breaking it down in his press conference, how much Rodgers had to do with, identifying that play pre-snap and then hitting the ball to MVS. Just a huge play by Rodgers. And then had the beautiful deep ball to MVS later that MVS unfortunately dropped. So I thought those 2 were both gorgeous balls. He had the touchdown pass to Tunyon where it's just a vintage Rodgers throw. He's kind of throwing to the side. If you haven't seen the all 22 replay, go back and watch it because that's a gorgeous throw. Has another play on a rollout to Tunyon where, again, he's midair, Superman in midair, throwing it sideways, just ridiculous plays. We saw a little bit more out of that from Rodgers. Just overall, I thought his level of play outside of those 3 potential turnover-worthy passes was really strong in this game. And I actually thought he overcame some leaky offensive line play, which I'll get to in just a moment, and maybe not the greatest to play from his wide receivers overall in this game. I thought this was one of the few games this season where I could point to and say, I think Rodgers really completely elevated the play of the team. The rest of the year, I think you can point to the strong play of the offensive line, Davonte Adams tearing it up, and Tunyon playing better, and all those sorts of things. I thought this game was one where he kind of took it upon himself at times and really elevated the play of others. Number 2 on my list, Davonte Adams. And this was not your vintage 150-yard, 3-touchdown game from Adams, but I think one of the more important plays of the game was the pass interference penalty that he drew on a key 3rd down. So that was a huge play in the game. I can't remember if it was 3rd or 4th down, but either way, it was a huge play in the game. And then had the touchdown late in the game, had a couple 3rd down conversions that he converted. And also what I think goes unnoticed sometimes is, as he gets more and more attention, he's taking 2 defenders on a ton of plays. Like, that has so much value to open up the rest of the offense. If you're, basically taking 2 defenders and putting them on 1 player, the rest of the offense should be pretty open because you're doubling up 1 player, especially when Adams is going deep down the field. So that's going to open a lot of stuff underneath. I thought we saw that a lot this game as well. So, and also just don't forget that even when Adams is double teamed, even when, the ball's not coming his way, he's still running gorgeous routes and doing what he can to get open. And we saw some of that in this game as well. And then number 3 on my list was Aaron Jones. I thought he got about as much as could possibly be squeezed out of what the offensive line gave him in this game. I didn't think it was one of the offensive line's best game from a run blocking standpoint. There were a couple really nice cutbacks from Aaron Jones. That 3rd down check down where he broke like 3 tackles and got 12, 15 yards out of it on a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, whatever it was. I thought there were just a number of runs from Jones where he got a lot out of, not a ton of blocking. Had a couple nice, swing passes to the outside. Those both of those were blocked up really well by the receivers and the tight ends, but I thought those were nice plays from Jones as well. So just a really solid overall game from Aaron Jones. On the flip side, my lowest graded player in this game was Billy Turner. And I know, it's always tough, right? You want to give the guy credit because he's kicking out to left tackle, which is certainly not his most natural position. I know he played it a ton in college, but his NFL position is probably right guard, right tackle, and all of a sudden having to kick to the left side, play left tackle, and then go against Robert Quinn for a vast majority of the game. It's not the easiest transition in the world to make, but I thought he struggled in this game, and it did give me some pause for concern. I thought he settled down a little bit later, but overall, I thought it was a tough game for him. Had the holding penalty, allowed a few pressures on the day. It wasn't great in run blocking. And again, I know it wasn't an easy assignment. I know it was his first game switching to it, since playing it real early in the season. But it did give me some pause and cause for concern. And just as I looked across the offensive line, Turner graded, far in the negative in this game. Lucas Patrick was basically neutral. Lindsley was neutral. Jenkins was basically neutral. And then Rick Wagner also basically neutral. I mean, you had 4 basically neutral players. And then a really low negative in Billy Turner. I thought this was a tough game, and I think Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack both played really well in this game, and I think it's a strong group when you look at Robert Quinn, Khalil Mack, and Akeem Hicks, but this gives me pause for concern. I'm not trying to be negative here, a downer, but as you look at Tampa Bay again with Shaq Barrett as well as Jason Pierre-Paul, New Orleans with Trey Hendrickson or Cameron Jordan, those type of teams that you're going to have to face up against. I think they'd be okay against Seattle. Certainly the Rams to some extent, with Aaron Donald. I know you have a chance maybe to control him a little bit with Elton Jenkins and Corey Linsley, but they're going to try to get him matched up with Lucas Patrick as much as possible. I do think there are some things that need to get cleaned up. And I think Wagner and Turner can survive on the outside. I think you're going to have a really strong play from especially Corey Linsley and Elton Jenkins, which I don't think we really truly got from this game against the Bears. So I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on moving forward, is just how good this offensive line can play in the absence of David Bakhtiari, especially in the situations where Green Bay may be, falling behind in the second half and need to come back and need to throw the football a ton. That could be a situation and scenario where I think Green Bay could be susceptible to not having David Bakhtiari in the lineup. My second lowest graded player was MVS. I know he had the really nice touchdown. I know he had another, 15-yard completion, also had a nice run on an end around, but that drop was a huge momentum-changing play in the game. That was basically a game sealer for MVS, and it's a perfect ball from Aaron Rodgers, and you just have to make that play. Also just thought he struggled getting off man-to-man coverage on a couple different plays, which helped towards this as well. Again, MVS is what he is at this point. He's a wild card. He's going to give you some big plays. He's going to break your heart at times. I still think he has value as that number 3 wide receiver on the team, but he's got to figure out a way to cut down on the errors, the mental mistakes, and the drops, and make sure that he's just becoming more consistent, because those plays are game changers. And in this game, it really allowed Chicago to get back in the game. He catches that ball and it's completely over at that point. And instead, they had to kind of grind it out through the third quarter. So that was a big game changing moment, and it was graded very negatively because of that. And then my third lowest graded player was Allen Lazard. Nothing egregious here, but I just thought that he struggled to get open again in man-to-man coverage situations, especially against, some lesser cornerbacks. The Bears were pretty beat up in the defensive backfield. So I thought this was an opportunity for MVS and Lazard to show themselves, knowing that Davonte Adams was going to be a focal point for the Bears defense. And I just thought Lazard and MVS struggled to get off of man-to-man coverage on a handful of different occasions. And that was the primary reason why MVS and Lazard, obviously MVS the drop, but then MVS and Lazard graded poorly in some of those situations. So top 3, Rodgers, Adams, and Jones. Bottom 3, Turner, MVS, and Lazard. That's going to do it for me. Thanks again for joining me here on YouTube for this Wednesday edition of the podcast. Make sure to check out Dusty, Steve, and Sarah on the audio version, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. I'll be right back here tomorrow, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And oh, by the way, Packers Pack-A-Day podcast merchandise is now available in the Cheesehead TV store, so make sure to check that out as well. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.